Prologue. Fitz remains physically weakened after the attack by Prince Regal and faces uncertainty about his future. Burrich and Junkie are unable to determine the extent of his injuries, offering only time as a cure. Fitz struggles with the idea of living as a cripple, fearing he is useless and unable to fulfill his duties to King Shrewd and Prince Verity. He is also haunted by his feelings for Molly, believing he is unworthy of her. Burrich, loyal to Fitz's father, tries to counsel him, but Fitz resolves to leave Buckkeep and move forward alone, severing ties with his past. In Chapter 1, political unrest and Outlander raids threaten the Six Duchies. Prince Verity is burdened with military duties, while his brother Regal seeks power. Kettricken struggles to be accepted as queen-in-waiting. Fitz's, weakened and troubled by visions, sees the Red Ship Raiders attack Silt Bay. The Fool visits him, and they discuss the vision, where Fitz's fears for someone named Molly. The Fool is unable to help, but reveals that many suffered in Silt Bay, including a woman who survived brutal injuries. Fitz's, driven by guilt and responsibility, insists that Verity be summoned to act. In Chapter 2, Fitz, Burrich, and Hands arrive at Buckkeep after a long journey. Fitz is weakened by the hardships and concerned about Regal's reaction. At an inn, Hands overhears rumors about Fitz's condition, including talk of his death. Upon reaching Buckkeep, a soldier recognizes Fitz, but Burrich asserts their identities. Fitz is reminded by Burrich of his status as a royal bastard, not a prince. Burrich helps Fitz adjust to his new role and responsibilities, and Fitz reflects on the changes since his departure. Later, Fitz is asked to report to the king but finds Verity absent. He finally returns to his chamber, weary and ready for rest. In Chapter 3, Fitz wakes up feeling weak and determined to find Molly. He speaks with Verity about Regal's threats, and is given permission to pursue his own errands. In Buckkeep, Fitz encounters Lacey, who takes him to Patience's chambers. After a brief conversation, Fitz is left alone, feeling dizzy, and is helped up the stairs by a servant, revealing it's Molly. They argue about past misunderstandings, revealing Molly's pain over Fitz's lies and abandonment. Molly explains how her life unraveled after her father's death, leading her to Buckkeep. She ends the conversation, leaving Fitz heartbroken. In Chapter 4, Fitz recovers from illness and speaks with Chud and the Fool about court matters, particularly concerning Kettricken. Lady Patience reprimands Fitz for his relationship with Molly, urging him to distance himself from her for political reasons. Chede advises Fitz to focus on Kettricken and be cautious of political enemies. Fitz, frustrated by his position, wanders Buckkeep town. There, he encounters a merchant with a wolf cub in a cage. Fitz reluctantly agrees to buy the wolf, taking it to a disused cottage to care for it, with plans to release it once healed. In Chapter 5, Fitz struggles with his feelings for Molly while continuing his physical training. Kettricken expresses frustration with her limited role, prompting Fitz to advise her on becoming a more influential queen. Fitz is drawn into court intrigue, navigating his position as Kettricken's advisor and dealing with Regal's tension. Shrewd tasks. Fitz with traveling to Ripplekeep to copy important scrolls for Verity and inspect a relic. Meanwhile, Fitz faces a challenge from Virago, who mocks him and insults his heritage. After a tense confrontation, Virago is struck with a debilitating illness, and Fitz's challenge goes unfulfilled. In Chapter 6, Chivalry, the eldest son of Queen Constance and King Shrewd, is often sent away to handle border disputes, while his brother Verity, eager to join him, is kept at home. After 6 years, Verity finally accompanies Chivalry, assisting in negotiations. Meanwhile, the youngest son, Prince Regal, stays in court and is groomed by his mother to be king. Fitz returns to Buckkeep, where he observes Kettricken and Regal riding together. Verity confides in Fitz about troubling reports of forged ones working in groups near Buckkeep. He tasks Fitz with investigating quietly. In Chapter 7, Kettricken arrives at Buckkeep and faces an attack from forged ones, having been abandoned by Regal. Fitz rescues her, but she shows her own strength by killing her attackers. This act earns her respect, though Verity is concerned about the violent impression it creates. Verity then begins training Fitz to control his thoughts and keep his emotions hidden to avoid unintentionally broadcasting his private feelings. Verity rewards Fitz with a better sword for saving Kettricken. Despite Verity's warning, Fitz reflects on the complex dangers of skilling and the vulnerabilities it exposes. In Chapter 8, Kettricken leads a hunt against the Forged Ones, viewing it as an act of mercy rather than vengeance. Her leadership impresses Verity but angers Regal, who perceives her actions as a threat. After the hunt, Kettricken and Verity honor the fallen in a solemn ritual.